Many of you may have noticed lately that there's a group of people, while preaching tolerance and acceptance, do the absolute opposite. The regressive left? Well, yes, but I'm talking more specifically about a subgroup within the regressive left, and that is, of course, the trans community. Let's take a closer look into the situation. Let's first talk about hypocrisy, which has come to light more than ever with the super straight movement, which is a reactionary movement to the absurd claims that if a straight guy doesn't want to perform sexual acts with a trans person who has all the male equipment, then he's a phobe, which is of course ridiculous. Remember when the left were all about my body, my choice and keep out of our bedrooms? Yeah, good times. The main argument I've seen them make is that super straight is somehow transphobic and a made-up sexuality, which is ironic because they've made up hundreds of them and insist that they're real. So I think we should all lean into this and insist, like them, it is indeed real, and that they should stop being superphobes. The trans community have been consistently aggressive, more so than other groups on the left, which is saying something, and it's devolved into outright threats. Most over Twitter because your made-up gender hasn't been ordained by the SJW cult leaders, like their made-up genders have. Like this, guy threatening to kill us all with his bare hands. Utterly terrifying. The sheer arrogance of these people is frankly mind-blowing. They speak as if they have some kind of authority over everyone, as seen here saying you're not allowed to exclude trans people from your dating preferences, as they're the moral and legal arbiters of dating. Like, who the fuck died and left them in charge? This absurd level of entitlement is what I'll be referring to as Karen syndrome. There have been quite a few reports of women being attacked by these predatory men masquerading as women, in environments where that kind of thing really shouldn't happen. Now, I'm no fan of safe spaces, as I'm sure you know if you've watched any of my videos, but in places like bathrooms, female prisons, or domestic violence shelters, you can understand the gender segregation. In those situations, you expect to be relatively safe, but like the wily crocodile, these predators camouflage themselves and wait for the perfect time to strike. This isn't the only example of violence, however. They often rally to protest events like this Women's Place UK Labour Party conference, banging on windows and screeching trying to drown out the speakers, even going as far as to douse one of the attendees in water, which, while mild, is still assault. And again in London, another feminist get-together in a venue right next to Grenfell Tower. If that name rings a bell, it burned down a few years back, killing 72 people, and the trans activists thought the best way to win the hearts and minds of the public was to use smoke bombs. Once they saw what a bad reaction they got, they finally tried to backpedal and apologise on Twitter, but it was a pretty half-assed apology. While I generally disagree with these feminist types on principle, I would never try to prevent them from meeting. If you have a problem with a group like this, you beat their arguments. Don't harass and assault them on the street. This seems to be a tactic used by lots of people that I think know they're wrong, but still want to enforce their change. Another group that springs instantly to mind would be Antifa and BLM. You would expect the trans community to be a bit more picky about who represents them. It's a criticism I've levelled at a few communities, Islam for example. These extreme elements that draw a spotlight to the community and drum up an extreme amount of hate should be ostracised from the community. One example that comes to mind is Jessica Yaniv, who's famous for being a pain in the arse for anyone who happens to cross them even mildly. For example, the salon that caters to females refused to wax Jessica's balls, and then was sued for discrimination. But she sued so many people now, it's clear that this is her grift. All the while doing untold amounts of damage to the reputation of the community at large. But still, they protect their own, no matter what the cost. There is more to this topic, and I could talk about trans people taking over women's sports, but I think we'll leave it here for now. A question I asked before, but I will ask again because of all the great responses I couldn't use. If you had to pick, what would you pick for your gender identity? There was an unbelievable amount of attack helicopters last time I asked, so we'll see. Answers that make me laugh the most will be put at the end of my next video, and as always, thank you for your time.